And I know you're as anxious as I am to get into close action. But we must bring him right up beside us before we spring this trap. That will test our nerve. And discipline will count just as much as courage.
The Age of Fighting Sail. Part 3. A Game of Cat and Mouse on the High Seas. By June 1778, HMS Victory had spent 19 years in preparation. A monument of British naval might, as formidable as she was elegant. Now, with her hull newly fortified and her decks packed with cannon, she was at last ready to face the open sea. In an era when the Royal Navy was England's bulwark against a world of enemies, her completion was timely indeed. The winds of war were blowing in earnest, and though Britain's American colonies had long since begun their rebellion, it was not the Americans that kept the Admiralty awake at night. Across the Channel, France had quietly bided its time, nursing the wounds of defeat from the 7 Years' War. While Britain had built her empire in peace, the French Navy had risen from the ashes, funded by the boundless coffers of Louis XVI and armed with the lessons learned from past mistakes. In February, France had signed a treaty with the American revolutionaries, declaring a subtle but unmistakable war against England. And, unlike the Americans, the French could bring the full force of their naval power to bear. With the specter of conflict growing darker, Victory's first captain, Sir John Lindsay, a hero of the 7 Years' War, was dispatched to bring her down to Portsmouth, where Vice Admiral Augustus Keppel would soon make her his flagship. Lindsay arrived at Gillingham in March, the men rowing him out through the misty dawn to his new command, the great ship's hull looming from the water like a fortress. His arrival marked the beginning of a frenzy of preparation. Ballast was sent ashore, and supplies flowed into her holds by the ton. 45 tons of biscuits, 25 tons of pork, 10 tons of flour, 50 tons of beer, all joining the 35 tons of powder and 120 tons of shot that would fuel her mighty guns. Cannons were cleaned and loaded, the decks scrubbed and polished until they shone, and the masts rose to their full, towering height, ready to bear the ship's vast spread of sail. On April 25th, with her crew arrayed in crisp lines, the Victory fired her first 21-gun salute to welcome King George III himself, who had come to inspect her on his royal yacht. The king spent 3 hours aboard, touring the decks, his satisfaction evident. At last, on April 27th, Victory dropped her moorings and headed to sea for the first time. As she rounded the coast, Victory's crew familiarized themselves with her layout, her rigging, her guns, and in Portsmouth, Admiral Keppel, one of England's finest, prepared the fleet that would stand between England and invasion. Just a few weeks later, on May 14th, he stepped aboard the Victory, inspecting the ship's every corner with a practiced eye. Despite the grandeur of her decks and the gleam of her brass and polished wood, he was aware that a fierce contest lay ahead. Keppel had been granted a noble fleet of 21 ships of the line and 4 frigates, charged with guarding the Channel from French incursion. However, he was painfully aware that his fleet was a mixed bag. Some of the ships were battle-hardened, ready for the dangers ahead, while others, hastily recommissioned, were less than seaworthy, their timbers old, their rigging worn. But the Victory, sturdy and freshly fitted out, was his chosen flagship. He transferred his flag from the Prince George and made Victory the heart of his fleet, bringing with him his favored captain, Jonathan Falkner, who promptly set to work shaping the crew and instilling discipline. As a first act, he ordered Victory's name to be removed from her stern. Keppel believed that in battle, the sight of her name was no use except to the enemy. Throughout the next month, Keppel's fleet drilled intensively. Sailors scrambled aloft, learning the ropes and the rhythm of the ship, while below decks, gun crews drilled at their stations, hauling cannon with precision and speed. Every man knew his task, from the gunners who would unleash broadsides to the powder monkeys who would dart back and forth in the chaos of battle. Finally, on June 13th, 1778, Keppel's flotilla set sail from Spithead. They were a sight to behold, cutting a course through the choppy waters of the Channel as the faster frigates surged ahead. These nimble ships were the eyes of the fleet, scouting for signs of the enemy and reporting back with signals that could change the course of a battle. Day after day, the Victory's men drilled and prepared, every order issued with the knowledge that conflict loomed just beyond the horizon. 4 days into the cruise, excitement crackled across the fleet as Keppel's lookouts spied sails on the horizon. Signal flags snapped aloft, spelling one word: enemy. The scouts had encountered a light French squadron out of Brest, 2 frigates, a corvette, and a lugger. Nothing near the force that Keppel feared, but a clear sign that war had begun. The British frigate Arethusa soon closed in on one of the French frigates Belle Pole, their cannon thundering across the water as the 2 ships exchanged broadside after broadside, the clash stretching on for 4 long hours. At last the Belle Poule, her hull shot through with splintered gaps, fled into the rocky bays of Brittany, with the corvette and lugger following close behind. Only one ship, the French frigate Licorne, lingered too long and was seized, towed as a prize to Victory's stern. But what Keppel found aboard the captured vessel was not what he was expecting. In the Licorne's hold, among the crates of powder and ammunition, Keppel discovered a chilling surprise. The French had assembled 32 ships of the line in Brest's harbor, their combined firepower totaling nearly 3,000 guns. Keppel, bold as he was, knew that his 21 ships would stand little chance against such a force, and that he could not risk losing Britain's first line of defense. He ordered a swift retreat to Portsmouth and anchored at Spithead on June 27th, where he pleaded for reinforcements from the Admiralty. The next 12 days saw a frenzy in the dockyards. 3 ships of the line were readied for sea, their crews scrambled together from any able sailor in port, while 6 were promised from the convoy escort arriving from the West Indies. With these reinforcements, Keppel had at least 30 ships, and on July 9th he led the fleet out to sea once more. Keppel's mission was twofold: intercept the French fleet before it could join with the Spanish at Cadiz, and protect 2 incoming convoys from the East Indies, laden with goods that were critical to England's economy and morale. But, unbeknownst to Keppel, the entire French fleet under Admiral Comte d'Auvilliers had already sailed from Brest on July 8th, setting a collision course for Keppel's fleet in the open Atlantic. For over a week, the British and the French fleets scoured the oceans south of England. Each fleet stretched wide, their sails filling and fading with the gusts, neither aware of the other's precise location. Days passed in tense anticipation. Lookouts scanned the horizon for any sign of the enemy. Then, on July 23rd, the sighting came. Sails, countless white specks against the endless blue, stretching as far as the eye could see. It was the French fleet, spread out before the British like a waiting adversary, and Keppel, his heart pounding, held course, the wind filling his sails as the 2 mighty fleets closed in on each other. By dusk, Keppel knew that the engagement would need to wait until dawn. He ordered every ship cleared for action. On deck, the men lashed down the cannons, stripped the sails, and secured every line in preparation for the battle. In the dim light of evening, the crews stood ready, each man silent, their minds racing with thoughts of the coming clash. At dawn, Keppel expected to see the French fleet arrayed before him, the battle line set. But as the morning mist lifted, a new reality dawned. During the night, d'Auvilliers had outmaneuvered him, bringing his ships into an upwind position, a masterstroke of seamanship that granted him the weather gauge, a key advantage in maneuverability. Now the French fleet held the wind, the power to dictate the terms of battle. Keppel's frustration grew as he watched d'Auvilliers refuse to descend and meet him. For 3 days, the British fleet pursued the French, both sides inching across the Atlantic, their ships stripped and ready for the battle that would not yet come. Keppel's men were weary and tense, clinging to the ropes and cannons, awaiting for the moment when the guns would finally roar. Then, on the 3rd day, a black squall swept across the water, a wall of wind and rain. The British fleet scrambled to furl their sails, the Victory's decks awash in rain as cannon rolled against their lashings in the storm's fury. For over an hour, visibility was lost. The sound of ropes snapping and waves pounding created a tumult of noise and chaos. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, the squall dissipated, the rain shifting eastward and revealing a stunning sight. There, on the now clear horizon, the entire French fleet was bearing down upon them, sails billowing, hulls dark against the brightening sky. The men aboard the Victory stood frozen, and even Keppel's voice caught in his throat as he issued his first command for battle. England's fate now lay on the edge of a precipice, as the greatest naval clash in recent memory was now beginning in earnest.